This is not the SoHaE video, just a SoHaE video to tide you over until I'm done with the review. In said review, I'm struggling to find an appropriate location for this segment. I don't want to cut it because there is some unit analysis that's germane to the point of unique design philosophy present in SoHaE. Pardon the absolute wankery of that sentence, but if I cover the 16 units I brought into endgame, I can make most of my points. I'll probably bring this up in the review proper, but SoHaE does do that annoying thing where it constricts your deployment slots for several chapters before letting you go hog wild and have almost too many deployment slots for the final portion of the game. That is a minor complaint, only magnified by some absolute shittery present in a lot of SoHaE's cast. Again, something for the review proper. SoHaE is not a particularly interesting lord. Being Lin's daughter, she has much the same strengths and weaknesses Lin has. SoHaE has the advantage of 3 times effectiveness, Lin has the advantage of an entire mode just for her. I'll be honest, for all my complaints of FE7's mediocre cast, and the lords are included in there, mine always seem to turn out fine. SoHaE is in a comfortable spot of being a decent frontliner with her excellent speed, allowing her to dodge, while also being resilient enough to not die when she doesn't. A majority of bosses in SoHaE are cavs, armoured, axe wielders, or a combination of the three, allowing SoHaE to use Manikaddy to great effect. Being sword locked is a slight problem, but you get a Lance Reaver fairly early, which covers her biggest weakness. Soul Caddy is an interesting proposition. It does happen that Soul Caddy can one-hit KO where her other options are 2-hit KOs risking damage, but it's rare. Soul Caddy really comes in handy against the few war dragons that pop up before promotion and against the several that show up after. On promotion, hers is late, no two ways about it. Elibe is 3 for 3 on promotions that come too late. Although I'll admit I had to hammer in both Manikaddy and Soul Caddy and almost went through Manikaddy twice, maybe I was overusing her, but I did want my return on investment of the Apples drops. Bows on promotion is fine, short bows are fairly common in SoHaE. I'd say they're SoHaE's best option. She needs crits to punch all the way through an enemy's HP bar. SoHaE will lack 1-2 range for most of the game, and 1-2 range is pretty important, but you should have the entire rest of your army to cover that for her. SoHaE does get a third preference weapon, Joro Caddy, but honestly it performs as well as a silver sword. It might grant some better defences and change her animations, but I certainly didn't use it as much as her other swords. Overall, SoHaE is not a powerhouse lord, but it's rather frequent that she's the right unit for the job thanks to her preference weapons. She's Lin, but better, and without 2 other lords partially competing for her niche. I like bow cabs, but my early experience with Fire Emblem suggests the opposite, not helped by the fact that bows were typically abysmal, at least when I started playing circa 2013, before Fates. Now, Yeke is interesting. The Yeke is a promoted version of him, so why would you use him? I foresaw that SoHaE wouldn't really give me too much trouble, I was wrong in parts, and I figured I wouldn't need the Yeke, so he got his time to shine. Despite numerous early game misses high in the 90s and a direct competitor in a big fat bastard, I typically have a soft spot for Chapter 1 units. Yeke would eventually stop disappointing, but rarely would he venture into the exceptional. SoHaE gave me a lot of chances to split my forces. Yeke typically found his way into the cavalry side and would most often bait out enemy dudes with javelins, or be on hand to slot any irritating flyers. Frequently, Yeke was my fastest unit by a significant margin, to such a degree I don't remember him not doubling basic enemies. I'm sure he sometimes didn't, but it was a rarity. After he started using his compound eyes and stopped missing, he cemented his place as a rock-solid, versatile unit in my army.
People like Grape.
There was a brief period I considered dropping Grape. He was definitely being outperformed by his counterpart, who may very well have been my overall MVP, but honestly his stats were just a bit mediocre all around. For a versatile frontliner that Cav should be, his defense was poor and his offense was par. I'm not sure why I stuck with him over an alternative, maybe Chapter 1 bias again, but he would eventually see improvement. The thing is, Grape excelled nowhere, which made him a good balance to his companion who excelled in specific stats, skill being the biggest difference. There was also that time he dodged a few javelins that probably should have killed him and I just had to endure it because I had no better options. Lucky him, lucky me. I will admit, the only thing better than one paladin is two paladins, and he was the second. Rostov, the best of all the units in my army, got absurdly above average growths, which combined with the disparity of his stats, especially compared to other units, gave him such a distinct, powerful niche that he was my first promotion, recipient of the Iron Rune, and flat out favourite unit to use. The dichotomy between Rostov's and Grape's stats is also seen in Toby and Jim's stats. Yes, I read it as Gim too.
Guess what?
At least these are the two most clear examples because each pair appears together. I figured why not use the more extreme unit in both cases. I would drop Toby for another unit that made it onto this list, but Rostov stuck around until the end primarily for one reason: defense. More than any other unit, Rostov was an absolute brick wall, often taking 0 damage from physical assault, such was his absurdly good defense growth. I looked up Rostov's growths after he promoted, which is why I was then cursed with his defense stat not moving at all afterwards. Checks and balances, and his defense was honestly high enough that he was still the tankiest unit in my army by a good margin. His higher strength and con lent him much better to axe usage, and there was rarely a threat I would not just fling him into. Rostov did have his weaknesses, his dogshit raises shared by most of the cast, though his remained among the weakest, and his poor luck and skill did lower his hit rate, but it was rare for him to not defy the odds. Any subsequent playthroughs of SoHaE may lead to disappointment from him because his first showing will be his best. Any unit that reminds me of Gerwolf from Tak is a very fun unit indeed. Absolutely my run's MVP. Okay, now this is an odd one because I don't have much to say here that I wouldn't rather say in my actual review. I'll get more into the minutiae of Arel as a unit rather than just how the general idea of him is good. I don't really want to talk about his character either, so I'll settle for him being decent bait if you need him to be in the start of the game, being someone you want to protect from combat for most of the rest of the game, and going back to being decent bait in the end game if you've got the good terrain. The difference between mid and late game for Arel is the fact that he won't gain levels until a bit over halfway through. I also fucked up once and he got shot twice, which means he missed a level. Funnily enough, no one is strong enough to rescue the 25 con wagon, so all of your moves with Arel are final, no take-backsies. I think I prefer Lord Convoy in a vacuum, but this way your Lord can be off doing things while your army resupplies in a very niche and unlikely scenario. Arel is purely a utility unit, something I've kind of wanted to see in Fire Emblem for a while. Another unit I don't have much to say on, fairly interchangeable with either of the two other infantry healers you get. I think I stuck with Helga specifically because she had the best magic stat. She would end up having a subpar speed stat, meaning even after promotion she would rarely enter combat. Her magic stat was also honestly subpar, though it was the best of my magic users. I feel like I got pretty shafted with magic users in this game. Healer out of 10, irreplaceable but also a boring liability. I really like mercs. Pity they're not in my favourite games aside from Big Man Ike himself. I knew ahead of time that Emmy was Dorcas' daughter, and with all signs pointing to her being another respectably good frontlining mercenary type, she was a shoo-in for the team. There were very few points where I felt Emmy was underperforming. The closest she would get was her terrible res when she had to fight a mage, which she would always win against, and especially that time she fought a max magic shaman in the arena. After promotion, her poor res was now a problem given she was now acceptable bait for enemy mages with her hand axe. Emmy's skill stat also ended up a little low, and she definitely missed a handful of times because of it. More than anything, she started to excel with her light brand, which I believe was the other weapon I used the hammer on, taking out hand axe bandits and war dragons with equal fervour. I would typically not have her and Rostov on the same side during the frequent army splits. Consolidating strength is well and good, but I'd have been pretty fucked if all of my frontlining was with one half of the army. Where Rostov went, typically Emmy and Dorcas would go the opposite direction. I've got nothing complex to say about her, a fantastic overall frontliner emblematic of the mercenary class. Here's where I have to bring up a complaint with SoHaE that will also get mentioned in the review: Con. Erina may have entered with an impressive speed stat and quickly capped it, but being weighed down by even an Iron Lance is honestly kind of sad. She was still fairly good, and given she's your only flyer for several chapters, it's hard to justify not using her. Her poor strength was matched only by SoHaE, who would eventually vastly overtake her, and it is with this poor strength I came to a realisation. It's not that Pegasus Knights excel against mages, it's just that it's more satisfying to see a Pegasus do a 14x2 to a 28 HP mage and take 10 damage back than it is to see a Cavalier do 20x2 to a 28 HP mage and take 15 back. I've just spat out those numbers for the point. After promotion, she was consistently struggling to kill things in one round or not be doubled when using heavier equipment. Erina isn't even the most obvious case of poor con absolutely screwing over a unit's decent speed stat in SoHaE. Not much else to say, she's a decent, typical Pegasus Knight with even the often-cited weakness the class is oft purported to have. Rabi started off as your typical dark mage, good power, able to take on enemy mages well, a bit squishy, very standard stuff. As he leveled up, however, he began to falter significantly, which I noticed when he was barely going toe to toe with enemy mages and absolutely had to be kept out of physical combat. Again, I looked up his growths after he promoted and found out he had to have been about 5 points below average magic. That's absolutely crippling. He only made it into the final team because of sunk cost fallacy, and an extra staff isn't the worst thing in the world. By far, Rabi was the worst unit in the final team. Apparently, blue and gold Armor Knights are the best sort. While Rick keeps typical Armor Knight weakness of poor move and resistance, he would become one of my fastest units, and complementing that was his inability to be weighed down by any regular weapon. His strength stat wasn't quite up to the same standard as the rest of him, but it never really mattered. I did end up feeling regret for FE7 generals missing out on swords, but not in a major way. With some very impressive growths throughout my use of him, and the sort of map SoHaE was throwing at me made me decide I absolutely have a place for a great stat block that, due to map design, can honestly keep up with the non-cav squad. Yeah, great unit. Really fun to give specialty weapons to and watch him destroy formations of cabs or armors. I swear my GBA troops always end up as absolute dog shit. Again, it doesn't really matter because they are the furthest thing from frontline units. At the very tail end of the game, Fromy did see some combat use, but otherwise she had to avoid any and all combat. Abysmal HP and defense, speed below average, and a redundantly high res stat, she really was a terrible unit, but I got to have my heels on wheels. Dancer is as Dancer does, nothing special about Camilla, no special rings, no staves, nothing. Just a pure refresher which is a bit uninspired, but I'm not saying no. I started to get a bit cross when I watched her get more strength ups than Rabi. Once Camilla hits level 20, she should have a high enough HP and avoid stat that she can be used to bait out an attack if necessary. One good thing about a lot of the army being subpar in a few aspects is a Dancer is a great choice. Rather than deploying another bad unit, you can make your good unit do another thing. Yes, I have been reduced to patently obvious statements about the most ubiquitously useful utility class the series has to offer. A returning character in his own way, apparently raising a kid has drastically increased Dorcas' growths, even nearly tripling his speed growth. Coming in with almost completely better stats than any other axe dude along with bow proficiency, he has two major weaknesses: poor experience gain, which is something I'll expand on in the full video, and poor defences, though his meaty HP pool typically makes up for that. A delight to use, and more proof that it's not necessarily bows that are awful, but the atrocious stat blocks of early game GBA archers that have garnered such a poor reputation for the weapon. 3 times effectiveness does help. Give Dorcas a Sword Slayer and watch him go do great work against any enemy you want. I'll be honest, I only used Vince because I saw that he was required to recruit another unit and he was a fairly consistent disappointment. Maybe that's too far, but he certainly took his sweet time getting off the ground. Not particularly strong or bulky, not fast, passable hit rates, awful res again, but hey, he's another flyer, which is important, I typically have too. Vince would start to impress after promotion with getting some better growths, breaking out the silver weapons and ability to guarantee kills with an iron sword, more reliably fighting enemy axe dudes, something I was less willing to try with a squishier Erina. I wouldn't pair them up as often as you'd think, and if I did, it was typically to get one of them the kill. A definite souring point was failing to kill Cavs with the Rider's Bane by a point or two of HP before promotion, and his sub 80 hit rate with said Rider's Bane. I can absolutely see someone not even bothering with Vince. With the Delphi Shield, he became a bit more versatile and approached success, but would typically languish in mediocrity. A late and somewhat begrudging addition, Eliza might not have made the team if I hadn't noticed her high magic growth. I was honestly considering going without a magic user, but discovering the answer to War Dragons was in fact magic, I thought I'd keep her around. Now, on War Dragons, she could typically double them for half their HP, but only with a fire tome because of her fucking 4 con. Eliza's speed is a bit below average, and this is not bloody helped by losing points on anything beyond the basic puny tome. Still, an extra staff, near guaranteed increasing magical power, and reason to use my Excalibur tomes, Eliza was quite a good addition, even if there weren't really better options. She definitely needed an escort wherever she went though, and didn't even reach a high enough staff rank to use Physic. Another unit added because there wasn't anyone better, but this time Tsas was quite good on her own merits, managed to have her own niche by having a res stat, and was very much earned by fulfilling her recruitment requirements across numerous chapters. Tsas even has her S-rank weapon in swords, not bows, so she's not a total replacement for a trained nomad either. Very well done. I would consider Tsas to be the Goto of the game, because the guy who's supposed to be is a bit underwhelming about it. Swordmaster Goto, are you stupid? For what will be the last unit to talk about, again, I don't have much to say. An excellent stat block that you might not need to add, but she can easily find her way in, especially with the expanding deployment slots. Maybe if she kept her fancy brave sword, there'd be more incentive to use her, not that I seem to need it. So that was my team, some high highs and very low lows. Unlike other ROMhacks or Fire Emblems where I like everyone on my final team, and they typically each contribute to the final battle in their own way, I felt like that was much less the case for SoHaE. I'll admit even the worst unit, Rabi, did okay, but only because he was bloody handed dispensed on a silver platter. Anyway, thanks for watching, full review coming soon.